Morning. Welcome to Douglas and the meeting of the Game and Fish Commission. As is customary, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let me get some housekeeping here. So those, I better put my glasses on. So those watching via Zoom, if you do not send an advanced comment sheet prior to the start of the meeting, but would still like to comment on an agenda item, please do one of the following. If you are on Zoom via your computer, you can send a chat to the host with your name and the agenda item you wish to comment on. Yes, that's that. Director Nisbet. Oh, yes. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the previous commission meeting.
A second.
Moved by Commissioner Live, seconded by Commissioner Roberts to approve the minutes of the prior commission meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Well, good morning, Mr. President, members of the commission. I've got a few items. It looks like about 4 or 5 items here today that I wanted to update you on during my director's report. First of all, we did recently here a couple weeks ago had the second meeting during the interim with the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee of the Legislature. There were several game and fish items that they had on their list that we provided testimony on. Chief Osterland and I attended that meeting. We ended up for some kind of unexpected happenings the morning of the meeting. We had to appear virtually from just a few miles away from the meeting. But anyway, we were able to appear virtually and testify at the meeting. One of the things that the legislature put together, that this committee put together since the last meeting, was something that they have had interest in since I initially talked to them about aquatic invasive species. And this, I've talked to all of you about some kind of an emergency account that would come from one of the state's many various funds that would pay for any kind of a rapid response plan implementation that we were required to do in the event that quagga or zebra mussel showed up somewhere in our state. Out of that discussion, one of the things that the chairs felt was something worth looking into was some kind of a bill that would impose, in legal terms, what's called strict liability on a person who was responsible for introducing those 2 mussels into a water in our state. So since the last meeting, they put together a draft of a bill that they asked us to testify on. We were comfortable with the draft. Essentially what the bill would do is if you were to put your boat on a water and not get it inspected first when you came from out of state, you would be required to do a couple of things. One is if you're contacted and cited, you would have to go and receive an inspection to see if you had mussels within 48 hours. And then secondly, if that water were to be determined as a positive water within a certain period of time, and that time hasn't been identified yet, our recommendation was at least 2 years. But anyway, if that was to happen, then you could be held strictly liable by a court for up to $25,000 is the number that they've talked to about at this point. And their intent was to provide another deterrent for folks who potentially come into the state without having their watercraft inspected. So anyway, they did not take final action on that bill. They wanted to consider, they wanted to think about it between now and the next meeting. I'm sure there will be another robust discussion about that. It's the next meeting will be towards the end of October. The other thing that we talked about was, we have for years worked with Wyoming State Parks and also the power plant at Wheatland and Basin Electric to evaluate the potential to have Gray Rocks Reservoir and the surrounding recreation area. I'll call it, it's not a formal recreation area, but the area that's used around that reservoir to be, what were the potentials to turn that into a state park? Our issue has been, we've entered into an agreement with Basin Electric to manage the habitat and the access to the lake for many, many years now. And that worked for many years. It really was, we were obviously interested in providing the fishing opportunity. It's a tremendous fishery. But in recent years, with dramatically increased use, the camping and the non-watercraft type issues and management has become very problematic for our folks. I mean, as all of you know, our game wardens have other responsibilities other than, managing camping and off-road vehicle use and those kind of things, fireworks and those kind of things. And so we've been interested in, that we feel that's much more well-suited for the things that state parks do. The other thing at Gray Rocks is there's no established or designated camping areas. It's just kind of a free-for-all. And the other thing that complicates things is that in Platte County, the other two large reservoirs are state parks, and they're regulated and it requires reservations, and they've got designated camping. And so what it does is it turns everybody that doesn't want to go through those processes or that, forgets to do it, it pushes them all into this particular water. The reason this came before the committee is that, it requires, at the end of the day, it requires legislative approval. State Parks is now moving forward. We've got a letter from Basin Electric that's asked that it become a state park. And so State Parks is moving forward, and we've committed to work with them in any way to continue to do the work we do, managing and enforcing watercraft laws on the lake and managing the fishery, but having them do the things that they're more well suited for. Legislature seems interested. I think that we're off to a good start. It's a long process. They go through a site criteria evaluation process that is mandated by statute. But they had a good discussion about this, and I think it's off to a good start. The other two things we talked about, and I think I've talked with the commission once about this in the past. We've been approached by the Bureau of Reclamation to take over management of two areas that they have fee title to that are either Bureau Rec lands or BLM lands. One of those being at the Miracle Mile between Cordes Dam and Pathfinder. And then also the Bureau of Rec lands north of Glendale Reservoir. Miracle Mile is a very high use public fishing area. It's been used for decades, half a century at least, been highly used as just a tremendous fishery. And, Bureau of Rec is in a position where they manage water, they don't manage recreation. They're looking for somebody else to manage that. We have, to this point, not agreed to do that. We, saw very little benefit in us taking that over. It would be an increased responsibility to provide for our sportsmen essentially what's already provided. And we would incur some additional costs. And so we've not been interested. At the Glendale property, we've been releasing pheasants there as part of the Glendale special pheasant hunt for many years as well. But we continue to have access regardless of whether we have management responsibility or not. What I told the Bureau of Reclamation though recently, again, they came again and asked is that, if they would consider and they would enter into some negotiations on actually transferring the fee title over to the state from Bureau Rec lands, or in some cases BLM lands, into Game and Fish Commission or some other state-owned lands, with obviously some restrictions that we would be more interested. There would be more of a benefit. There are opportunities at both places to do some water development, including some good habitat development projects, potential for wetland development at both. And so, I do see some real benefits, and they have said that they're willing, and they've outlined a process. It's lengthy. We haven't gotten to the point yet. We've just had some very broad general discussions. We haven't gotten to the point yet to bring that to you for any kind of a formal approval, but know that that's coming. The legislature's been interested strictly from a informational standpoint about what state parks and game and fish are doing about recreational opportunity across the state. So more to follow on that. We haven't made any firm commitments on your behalf, but we're getting close to that point where we'll be talking to you more formally about that. We also provided the Travel Recreation Wildlife Committee with the Wildlife Task Force update, and I'll provide that to you here in just a second. And then also an update on our collaborative feed ground process over in Western Wyoming, which you are all familiar with and have had a very recent presentation on. As far as the Wildlife Task Force, they've met a total of 4 times. They spent the first meeting trying to basically outline the rules of the road and how they were going to go through decision making, and also which topics specifically they wanted to tackle. I think you're all aware of those. We provided those at the last meeting, but these are the 4 through these meetings. These are the 4 recommendations that they've all agreed to. I don't think we've had a no vote on any of these. We have had some folks that were absent, but there was unanimous support for those that were in attendance for these 4 recommendations that are going to move forward and have already, a couple of them already have, to the legislature. So the first one was to recommend that the legislature change the allocation of resident versus non-resident licenses for what they've now termed as the big 5, which is mountain goat, moose, bighorn sheep, bison, and grizzly bear. And this would only apply to the male of those species. It would not apply to ewe lamb sheep. We don't have any of those licenses now, but if we did, it wouldn't apply. It wouldn't apply to cow-calf moose or cow-calf bison. But that recommendation was provided to the legislature at this TRW meeting to make that change. The other thing that they agreed to recommend to the legislature was that those big 5 licenses for males would be once in a lifetime. When you do the math and you look at the statistics, really there's not an opportunity for folks to draw 2 of those licenses. There was a day when you could have, but with point creep and the way that the point system works now, there's not enough resource out there for somebody to be able to draw 2 of those in a lifetime. And so the task force felt that was a worthy recommendation to push forward. So that has gone to the legislature as well. Now, as far as those 2, it's going to have to go through the committee process, and then it's going to have to end up in a bill draft. So there's more work to be done there, but the first step of that process started. The other thing that the task force, while it wasn't a topic they eventually decided to take up, because they really don't have, they don't have a lot of options or things they can recommend, was the topic of grizzly bear management. And most task force members said that of all the different wildlife issues they heard about, the one that they heard some of them most about was state management authority for grizzly bears and how to get there. Task force agreed to write a letter to the governor saying, basically stating their unanimous support for the transfer of grizzly bear management back to the state of Wyoming from the federal government and removing them from the endangered species list. The other thing that the group approved as a recommendation was that the governor and the legislature fund the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund to at least $200 million, which was the original amount that was envisioned when that bill was passed back in the early 2000s. And so as we were talking about providing opportunity, one of the common themes was, providing good quality habitat was at the very bedrock of being able to provide more wildlife opportunity. And the group felt strongly that was worth the state's investment. And that letter, I don't know if it got approved at this last meeting, I had to miss it, but it will be going forward to the governor and the legislature. So that's it on the task force. I would ask, Mr. President, if you've got anything to add. You're on the task force as well, and I don't know if you've got anything else.
Just reiterate that for the public to be completely involved in the process, there's lots of avenues for comment, either via Zoom or in person. And just wanted to continue to make the public aware that they are very much a part of this process. The task force has developed quite a laundry list of issues, and I think it would behoove the public to be aware of that and to be involved.
Any questions on the task force or TRW before I move on? All right, I did want to mention, and many of you have probably been a part of or seen some of this, but this has been one of our most important windows over this last couple of months of the year, our field season, when a lot of our terrestrial and aquatic habitat work can happen, with water levels and with weather. That for some projects, the window is very narrow. And this, our field folks, especially habitat folks in the last couple of months have been really busting their humps to get out and put money on the ground and get good things done. Our habitat and access management folks have been out working on your commission-owned lands, maintaining those lands, improving those lands, doing habitat improvement work there. I did have the opportunity, Chief Wiltanger and I had an opportunity to go over to the WIC WHMA and see a joint project between Game and Fish and the Army Guard, where the Army Guard, as part of their training, built a new patrol cabin there on the WIC WHMA, which was something that's been needed for a while. Great project. They did the same thing a year ago up on Laramie Peak, where they did renovations to some roads, and then also the patrol cabin at Laramie Peak. So anyway, good. There's a lot of great work going on. I've had an opportunity to look at a lot of the hay production on some of our WHMAs and some of the new investments you've made in pivots, specifically up around Du Bois. And there's a lot of those, like Spence Moriarty, is looking really good, even in a year when we had some pretty droughty conditions. We have had, and I think you've probably seen some of the public messaging that we've done. We've had some pretty big concerns in certain parts of the state with warm water and then very low water flows and the effects on fisheries. This certainly was not a good summer in most of the state for some of our better fisheries. We did message to sportsmen, that in certain waters, fishing after certain hours of the day when the water warmed up probably would result in very low chances of survival for fish that were released. And so, we discouraged in certain waters catch and release fishing after certain times of the day. Now with the shortened days, less daylight, cooler temperatures at night, I think we're getting back to a place that's okay, but we still have very low water levels in a lot of parts of the state, which is certainly concerning because we were really at a peak. 2 summers now of droughty conditions, and it's certainly going to have an effect on fishing opportunity. As many of you have probably seen, hunting season is well underway. I've already seen in the back of pickups and some photos of some really nice harvests, specifically elk, and I saw a really nice buck deer this morning and some bighorn sheep. So hunting season is underway. I did want to provide to the commission an update on, I know all of you have received a lot of pro and opponent comments regarding the Via Ferrata project up in Sinks Canyon. You've had some cursory information on this in the past, and I thought I would just give you an update on what actions the department has taken at this point and where we feel our role is. This has become very controversial. There's a lot of folks, especially in the lander community, local folks, that are very passionate on both sides about this particular proposal. A little bit of background: Sinks Canyon State Park, we own, the commission owns a portion of the lands within the state park, and we have since I think 2 acquisitions in the 30s and 50s got us to a point where where the lands that the commission owns were acquired. In 1971, the legislature enacted law that said that the Sinks Canyon area would be managed jointly by the state park and by Game and Fish. And basically, since that point in time, it's been managed as a state park. There have been multiple developments. There have been, there's concessionaires. There are, it's a highly used public area. And really, there are some definite wildlife values. There's wildlife winter range there. But it's been managed as a state park through an agreement between us and state parks since that point in time. When the state park looked at doing their master plan for Sinks Canyon, which is something that they do at other state parks, where they look at the long-term planning for improvements or maintenance of state parks, one of the components of that master plan was to build what's called a Via Ferrata, which is and I'm not real familiar with Via Ferrata. I'm much more familiar now than I used to be. But basically it's a some people have described to me as it's a bunny slope for climbers. So they permanently position drill holes, put anchors into the rock and cables so that people can learn to climb. This project proposal went through and was led by state parks, since it's managed as a state park, and we weighed in from a wildlife perspective and evaluated it. Specifically, this particular area, there have been nesting peregrine falcons there for many, many years, since back at the beginning of recovery when peregrine were still listed. So as our field folks evaluated this, they evaluated several factors. They looked at the frequency and occurrence of peregrine nesting around the proposed area. They haven't actually identified a specific site yet, but they're in that process. But we looked at the area and where peregrines had nested in the past. And we felt like if the state parks would put in place certain restrictions, that would alleviate our wildlife concerns relative to peregrine. And so those things that we've talked with the state parks about and told them that we would require as landowners is, first of all, that it would remain closed, that the site, if they were to construct it, would remain closed from March 1st to April 30th, so that peregrines could be free to select their nest site. And that if a peregrine nest was within a half a mile of the Via Ferrata, again, if it was approved and actually constructed, the department would determine if a targeted closure is warranted during the time that the birds are using the nest and during the time that the birds are fledging and learning how to fly. We told state parks that if that were to occur, we would monitor those nest sites and that the closure would lift once the young were flying confidently and not relying on the nest, which is approximately 2 weeks after fledging. Or the closure would be lifted if nesting was unsuccessful. And then also that we would evaluate that on an annual basis to see if there was any other adaptive measures that needed to be put in place. I do know I saw a public comment slip and some documents for you to review. I do know you'll hear some public comment on this. The proponents who initially approached state parks about this idea were interested in a new economic development opportunity to bring more people to the lander community, climbers to come to the lander community, and as a further development for the park. And certainly the opponents have been very concerned about, having more use in that area, concerns with peregrine and how it may affect nesting peregrine, as well as any further developments in that part of the area west of Lander, which is very, very important to the local community for a lot of reasons. So I think that probably provides a pretty good overview. I know you've seen a lot of emails. I don't believe at this point in time, because of the agreements that we have and because of the long-standing tradition of this being managed as a state park, I don't believe it requires commission approval. We did ask when we first started hearing a lot of concern, I did ask the state park director to convene a public meeting, and he did so last Monday and heard from folks on all sides of the issue, and very passionate public testimony on both sides. The other thing that we've heard is that folks feel like a lot of this planning was done without the public knowing about it. We didn't lead that charge, the state parks did, but our evaluation is that they had reached out, they conducted a planning process. There were multiple people that were involved in the planning process, but there still are some folks that just didn't know about it and felt like they didn't have an opportunity to be a part of developing this master plan. And so that's kind of a summary of both sides of the issue. There's a lot of details you'll see in those letters too, that I'm sure I've missed some of the concern on both sides, but I did, since you've heard so much about it, want to provide you just an overview from the department's perspective. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions of Director Nesbitt at this time? Okay, thank you.
That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Any questions for Director Nesbitt on any subject? Any? Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Glad you're back. Mr. Kennedy?
Mr. President, members of the commission, Director Nesbitt, good morning. Wanted to give you a quick update on the employee housing project in Jackson. I've been keeping you in the loop best I can via email. I apologize for all the emails, but I'm just trying to keep you in the loop on what's been a pretty frustrating process to drill test wells on South Park WHMA. Commissioner Ladwig in particular has been getting a lot from me because he's got some expertise that's been very helpful with regard to water. And he's got some contacts in that world of drilling too that have been kind of really nice to be able to go back and check with Commissioner Ladwig on. So it continues to be a very, very slow process. I was out on site Friday. They got a lot of water coming out of the first test well. Water quantity is not an issue. Water quality, they think we've got in addition to White Mountain operating the drillers, Jorgensen Engineering out of Jackson, they worked with a hydrogeologist to look a little bit more at the geology and the water. They think they now have the testing in place that is telling them that this is going to be a productive production well for the project. So that's good news. We still got tests that are coming back. They're looking at the fine clays and the silts right now in the water. And so it took us a while to get the right size screen. Everything that we've needed for materials has been extremely delayed, to say the least. So we just continue to push and push and push the best we can, and we're going to continue to do that. I guess the bottom line as far as the well is we think we got the one production well that will be really, really good for the project. They're already starting to look for the second location right now. They're not going to drill that second well though until we're 100% convinced about the water quality on the site. But I hope that it's good and we can move forward. I'll keep you all posted on that. So while we're waiting and working with all these entities on the water, we have continued to work on the project. And we've been actually quite a bit of work. I spent a lot of time working with Teton County. As you know, the commission chose based on our recommendation to you, based on our meetings with the planning staff and Teton County, we made the recommendation that the commission be exempt from the formal planning and zoning process, and you chose to do that. And so we've been working with the county to make sure that the county is on board. They're behind us in that decision. And in fact, they are. I spoke with all the county commissioners and the director of the planning department. We did receive a letter from the director of the planning department in Teton County. They think this makes sense and this is a really good approach. We've committed to them that we're going to work with them though, which we will, and the community. Once we get over this water hurdle, we'll start to engage the public a lot on this project. But again, I'm kind of waiting to make sure that this water situation is under control. So good news as far as with the county, they're being very supportive of the commission, very supportive of helping us wherever they can, but yet we don't have to initiate that formal 1.5 to 2 year process on zoning and permitting. So that's a good thing. I've been spending a lot of time working with Chief Wiltanger and his staff in services division on the strategy for pulling this project off. And there's essentially two ways the commission can go about this. And I think you're aware of some of these processes, but we can design, bid, build like we are doing with the Cwd project, or there's another path that we can take with what's called a construction manager at risk. And that is getting somebody, a contractor on board immediately on this project when we're ready to move forward, who would work with the architect and would work with all the civil engineering and the survey work and pretty much lead the process for the department, which takes us out of the lead as far as a bid process. We still have final decision-making authority, but it's a totally different process for going out for bids. It's the construction manager at risk responsibility. And the rules and the processes that they follow is much different. We're not required to take a certain bid, for example. So a lot of that could be avoided. There's a lot of pros and not all that many cons for going with the construction manager at risk. It does cost, obviously. So we would be decreasing the expenditures for an architect in terms of an architectural company doing a lot of the project management. It would reduce those costs, and we would just divert that money to a construction manager at risk. We have very rough estimates for moving forward on this proposal right now, but with the rough estimates, we're still below what we told you the total project cost would be on the project. You've set aside $9.7 million for the project, and we're going to come back to you at each step of the way to get approval to spend that money. And I think that we're going to be ready to come back to you, I hope, at the November commission meeting. So that the schedule is like this. We continue, get this water situation under control, get this first production well finished, drill the second well, move forward with the same with it. And once we know that that's a done deal, we'll bring to you a proposal for moving forward for the construction of the project with the schedule and everything. We've got a draft schedule right now, but I'm hesitant to hand that out or give that to you. So, Mr. President, what I'm proposing is we continue to work on this. You've given us sufficient flexibility and budget to get the water, all the work done with the water. We'll do that. We don't need more money for that. In October, I think late September or early October, I will be able to provide you a proposed strategy just for you to take a look at, and I'll get your feedback one-on-one from commissioners so that we can come back to you in November for final approval to move forward with either design, bid, build, or this construction manager at risk. I'm going to be recommending a construction manager at risk, and we can talk about that in the days to come to get you comfortable or figure out if that's something that you want to do. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Ladwig, do you have any input or comments on
No,
the?
I just, there's no input. I've, worked with the water a little bit, and I've talked with John quite at length on some of the things that I've picked up from the well drillers and the water people in our area, and hopefully it helps.
This whole process for materials is just extremely frustrating. It's just taking months to get what I would think that would only take a few days to get. So
I think that's the nature of the beast right now.
it is. Anyways, appreciate your support and putting up with all the email updates, and I'm going to continue to do that. And hopefully here in a couple of weeks, we're going to have thumbs up on the water, and we'll start moving forward on the project.
Well, we very much appreciate you keeping us in the loop. So
Okay.
thank you very much. Don't feel like you can't send us emails. Send as many as you want.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Wiltanger. A little different perspective here.
Good morning, Mr. President, Director Nesvik, members of the commission. Eric Woltanger, Chief of Services. Today, we'll go over two things, really a brief Cody update on your new Cody Regional Office. Things are looking really good. I was out there 2 weeks ago with the regional staff and with Lauren, our engineer. And it went from basically an open dirt field to we've got some vertical movement going. That's the main office building right there. Last week, there was nothing there other than concrete. So they have moved rather quickly. This was as of yesterday. They're cracking away at things. If I can switch. This is the cold storage building. Let me back up. Cold storage building is basically ready to be roughed in and closed in. So things are looking good on site. Go over just some brief highlights, I guess. The steel columns obviously have been set for the office, shop, and cold storage buildings. Framing for the cold storage is up. The crush base for the parking lot is nearly complete and prepped for asphalt. The air handling unit, which was a big unit for that building, it has been set. The steel joist and decking is on schedule to be on site on 9/16 for the rest of the building. One thing with that, if you recall, our contract date is May 31st to the end, May 31st, 2022. BHI has a pretty aggressive deadline, And they have set their deadline of April 1st. It's really their critical path, and this is one of their critical items to meet that deadline of April 1st. That's probably going to delay their deadline a little bit into possibly later in April or May, but I don't believe it's going to impact our May 31st deadline at all. So they talked to me yesterday about that, and more to follow on that. And then the final costs are being gathered for the additional work. If you recall, the approach way for Trail Creek, we're going to widen it and stuff, and it's not going to be a change order or increase to the commission. The landowner has agreed to pay any additional costs for what we're, I guess, prorated outside of what it's going to take. That's really it on the on-site progress. I do want to, I guess, give a shout out to Ron Sherwood. He's a project manager out there. And every time I've gone out there, I mean, he's a guy that is just getting it done. He's waiting for trucks. It's not trucks pulling in, trying to figure out where to go. He knows when they're coming and he's moving stuff. So if you go out there, you'll see things just happen from day to day. It's ever changing. So he's doing a really good job for BHI out there. The second order of business is to seek your official approval. I know we've talked about this in between meetings of change order number 2, which if you recall, there's 2 components to that. One is the material increase that we talked about at last commission meeting. And then we had to bite off $153,000 for labor, which is 33% of the increased cost due to the subcontractor changing. So I would stand for questions if you have any, and ask for your vote on the approval of change order number 2.
All right, would you give us that total? Those,
The total is $420,726 and 55 cents.
and is this the final change order that we'll be receiving?
Mr. President, this is hopefully the final change order I bring to you.
I think we strongly encourage that to be the case.
Message received and sent.
And we very much appreciate all your efforts and your team, Lauren, and everyone else working on this. I know it's not been an easy situation,
Yes, sir.
and appreciate all your efforts on our behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions?
No questions, Mr. President. I'm ready to make a motion. I would move that we accept the change order number 2 as presented by Eric for $420,726.55.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Brokaw, second by Commissioner Jolovich to accept the department's recommendation on change order number 2.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Wow. Mr. Bibby?
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the commission, Director Nesbitt. I just want to have one agenda item today, and it is a access easement request by Deborah and Randy Arnold. They own a 39-acre parcel adjacent to our Saratoga Lake public access area. Their property lies just within a little bit of just outside of the boundary of the public access area. And you can see there's an access road coming across here, and it goes through town of Saratoga property and then through the commission-owned property for about 300 feet before it gets to their property and their home. This is the access point that they've been utilizing for some time now to get to their property, but they approached us about getting an actual legal easement to get there. So we went through the process of working with them on that. They obtained a survey on their at their own cost, which they provided to us, which we used to determine the length of the road. And then subsequently had some discussions with a certified appraiser about the cost of an easement like that. This is an existing road. There's no negative impact to the public access area. And the total cost that they would pay for that easement at this time would be $829.35. And they've provided, again, like I said, the survey and all the costs associated with getting the project to this point. And the department's recommending that the commission vote to approve this access easement for the landowners.
Any questions for Mr. Bibby? Commissioner Ladwick?
Is this a private road, county road originally?
Mr. President, Commissioner Ladwig, this would be considered a private road. It's not a county road.
Okay, thank you.
And what is there, just a residential? Is that all they use that property for?
Mr. President, that's correct. That is their residence.
So is this a residential easement that they're, so it couldn't necessarily be a commercial venture or something like that in that area?
No, President Doobie, the width of the easement is at 30 feet, which isn't conducive to a commercial operation. It is simply to get legal access to their home.
I was just thinking for the future, if they decided to sell that property, what the easement would look like, how that works.
Mr. President, you're correct. So as written, the easement will be strictly for residential access. If that were to change in the future, we would need to be reapproached.
Okay, so residential, but how large is their plot of land there?
They have a 39-acre parcel.
All right, so they could split it if they wanted to. I'm sure
Mr.
there'd
President, they
be
could in the
hoops to
future.
go through.
Yeah,
So
they
then,
would have to go through all the approval process.
so would an easement, would that same easement carry to both parcels or however somebody, if they ever wanted to subdivide in that area, or would that be revisited as well? How does that work?
So we can put protections in an easement that would, like I said, create a situation where if they would like to subdivide that property, change the use or anything like that, that they would need to come back and ask for an additional approval to use it for that specific use. But as it stands now, it is just to get access to their home.
That would interest me. I don't know what you all think about that.
I like that idea.
Just because we can't predict what the future will hold, and
And Mr.
especially
President,
with the real estate market right now, who knows? Any,
President Doobie? If, I guess I need to back up a little bit. It's labeled Saratoga Lake Public Access Area. Who owns you said it's a private road up to the Game and Fish prior to going into our property there? Who owns the private road? You said it's labeled as a public access, but then it's a private, is it the right side that's the public access or the left side if it's a private road, how do we call it a public access?
so Mr. President, Commissioner Roberts, the main access for the public is at a different location. This particular road runs along this side of the southern part of the lake. The majority of the public access is on the northwestern side of it and from the southeast. So this particular road goes through the town of Saratoga and then through our property, the commission-owned property, and onto the landowners. So again, this is not the main public access location. We referred to the Saratoga Lake, that particular area, as the public access area, and that incorporates the boundary area for that unit, but that's not the specific location that we.
You don't have a specific blow up of the whole lake or anything?
Well, I have another map that I'm trying to get to. Wayne, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you, Wayne. So you can see the entirety of the lake here, but the majority of the property that the commission holds is actually on this southeast side of the reservoir, as you can see. And then there's the pockets of commission-owned property within the reservoir itself. But the particular area that we're talking about is right here.
Who owns that private road right there before it gets to us? Do you know?
So
Right there.
right here.
Yeah.
So I know this town of Saratoga owns property within that, along
Whole
that
thing.
road. Yeah. And they've worked with the town on a similar easement. So.
Okay. Thank you.
any other questions? Comments? Entertain a motion?
Mr. President, I would move that we grant them the easement, if it could be for maybe a single family use, something like that, but something that identifies President Doobie's concerns about future development.
Mr. President, Commissioner Byrd, we can put those provisions in there. Yes.
I'd second that motion.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Byrd, seconded by Commissioner Brokaw to accept the department's recommendation for an easement at Saratoga Lake. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, Mr. Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Brimmeyer. I'm trying.
Mr. President, members of the commission, and Director Nesbitt, thanks for the invitation to provide you some background information on wildlife management activities at the Game and Fish has been involved in, the wildlife division in particular. And this is basically, let's see if this works. This basically is to check in with you on and to give you an overview of what kind of activities we've been involved with since the April commission meeting when we set the 2021 hunting seasons. Specifically, what I want to do is talk a little bit about some of the activities we've been involved with since the spring time period, kind of that pre-hunt season framework timeframe, which includes the hunter checks, field checks that our managers will be involved with, and then some of the public contacts we have at the regional offices. And then finally, I'd like to touch on what happens post hunting season period or right after the hunting season's close. We'll talk a little bit about some of the activities the wildlife division and others in the department will be involved with. And this presentation is pretty narrow focused. It's mainly just the wildlife division. There's a lot of other things that are going on within the wildlife division, as Director Nesbitt mentioned in his update. There's a lot of habitat work that's going on right now, mowing projects, spraying projects, and I think we're up to about 85,000 acres that we sprayed last year by this time in the summer, and we're approaching that benchmark of acres treated again this year. So that, and again, this presentation only touches on a fraction of the things that we've been involved with. One of the more involved activities that we engage with following the April commission meeting is the sage-grouse lek monitoring. And during March and April, our personnel and volunteers and other agency personnel are going out to the field and checking leks. And this last spring, nearly 1,500 leks were monitored, and 16,000 male grouse were documented on those leks. And I believe Sarah just sent out a news release this morning that kind of highlights some of the changes that we observed with those leks over last year. Also, following some of the lek monitoring activities, our folks start looking at line transect surveys for pronghorn. And these are, it's a survey technique that uses an airplane, and they're following a bandwidth that's designated on the wing struts. And I'll show you some more information here, but it's basically to provide managers with an abundance estimate of how many antelope are actually on the ground. This technique was perfected by some of our folks. Remember our last commission meeting, Richard Ginzel was recognized for his contributions to the agency and Sabile. And Mr. Ginzel actually perfected this technique for land mammals, and it's used across the world now for African plains to some of the ocean mammals in Alaska, where they fly to determine abundance of those species. This particular image is a Cessna 182. It's equipped with a laser rangefinder that records the ground height above the ground, There's a PC that's on board that our managers are entering in data as they observe animals. And it provides that abundance estimate for our surveys. So this is what the wing strut looks like. And so you've got different bands identified on that wing strut. and managers focus on the first two, the A and the B band, and they don't, the model predicts that you won't miss anything directly in the first band, and you're supposed to watch where those animals are within those bands. You'll see the laser rangefinder that's attached to the wing strip there. And Wayne, if you want to see if that'll play. So it might be a little choppy, but this kind of gives you a perspective. So flying at 300 feet, and if antelope are in that A band, you mark it into the system, the pilot kind of plugs it in. But it can be a pretty bouncy flight. And if managers are in rough terrain, it gets pretty challenging to stay focused on what band those animals are in. Most people tend to focus on the upper ones just because it's easier to have your eyes out at a plane where the horizon is. But the model actually works best when folks are focusing on the first areas there. So another thing that we've been engaged with, and you guys visited the bird farm at the Sheridan meeting, but our bird farm folks are real busy picking up eggs. And if you can imagine, if you stop at the store to pick up a dozen eggs, our bird farm guys are picking up well over 3,000 dozen eggs. So almost 40,000 eggs in a season. And they're picking those up and getting them into the incubator. And we typically release about 36,000 pheasants between the two bird farms. Some of the other activities. So Andrea Orbano is holding a burrowing owl. So Andrea's marked over 49 burrowing owls in Wyoming, and burrowing owls are obligates to the prairie dog communities that you see. So the burrows that prairie dogs make, those burrowing owls are using those. And Andrea has a solar powered satellite transmitter on this particular owl. And of those 49, some of those movements that we have are pretty amazing. So she's had one that's covered a total distance of 4,500 miles, and it spends the winter down in Acapulco, Mexico.
Good call.
Smart bird.
That's where I wish I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also in the non-game program, they're exploring use of scent dogs, and this dog is basically activating on a burrow that Blackfoot ferrets are in. And so managers then would put up a trail camera at this site, and they have documented some additional ferrets outside of where they've been released in the past in Shirley Basin. So it's showing some promise there. And we hope to come back to you in one of the next commission meetings, give you an update on the monitoring and how the progress of that Blackfoot Ferret program.
Doug, so how does that work with these dogs in relation to the AIS dogs? What's the situation? We lease them?
I think
or-
the training is very similar. It's just that the animals key in on different
I mean, do
things.
we own the dogs or do we rent?
We're
them?
right now, these are conservation dogs that we're working with an NGO just to see how we're kind of trying it out to see how they work. So we don't own the dogs. But it's showing quite a bit of promise on ferrets. To me, it's more intuitive that you'd think they would key on the smell of a mammal than you would on weeds or other things, but there's a lot of different work that those folks are starting to train their dogs on. So, and then I need to throw in a wayward moose picture. So this is just happens to be one that wandered into near Cheyenne, and we have a number of urban wildlife conflicts that our personnel work on all across the state. And so it's there's just a lot of issues with our publics and how they deal with wildlife. And so our staff are usually on the front line of kind of helping to convey messages to our publics about those conflicts that they may be experiencing. And then finally on here, I put just an image up from Watercraft Safety, which Director Nesvik mentioned too, in that, watercraft safety is a huge deal in Wyoming, and with COVID and all the pressure that's being put on Wyoming's water resources, there's a huge need for our folks to be out in the field, and their representation on these lakes really helps to convey some information to our publics as well. The other ones I haven't really touched on, of course, are the large carnivore management, which, as you know from some of the presentations from Dan Thompson, that they're really engaged in looking at large carnivore issues across Wyoming and working with damage and conflict prevention. Also, our staff are looking at damage with on private lands from big game animals. As we get to the later in the summer, right before hunting season, a lot of our staff are looking at pronghorn numbers across the state, and the wardens and biologists equally go out and spend a lot of time on the 2-track roads on private lands and where they have access. And we're kind of taking an assessment of pronghorn numbers. And when they count these animals, they're looking at the numbers of bucks, numbers of does, and then the number of fawns and yearling bucks as well. And so the fawns will give them a picture of how they did this year for production. And then the yearling bucks give us a sense of what survived last year and what's on the landscape that, you know, will contribute to the population in the next year. So just to give you an idea, so far in August, the guys documented 40,000 observations of antelope. And last year we had just right at 70,000 antelope that they classified across the state. Once we get through the antelope classifications, a lot of our managers will start looking at the fall season, and we get some cooler evenings. Public engagement becomes even more critical in August. The staff at the headquarters office get a lot of folks that walk through the front counter seeking license and stamp information or places to hunt. We're also, the regional offices are, you know, pretty much a revolving door of people coming in, and managers continue to meet with landowners. They're talking about access and damage, and then enforcement efforts are also being planned for the fall season. And our regional managers are starting to develop their work schedules for check stations and other things where we contact hunters, which brings us to the fall time period where we're at right now. So a lot of the regions will have check stations set up across the state at strategic points where landowners or where hunters are coming out of. We'll target major access points. We have a couple mandatory check areas for CWD this year. So there's been some outreach regarding that from state communications and our regional I&E folks. And once you have a check station set up, you know, we try to staff those with enough personnel that we don't have too many vehicles stacked up. But a lot of times those hunters all come out of the area about the same time. And so we try to have enough people around to measure animals, take samples. And last year we collected about 6,500 CWD samples. And those get sent off to our lab where folks at the lab get really busy with trying to keep up with the samples as they come in, so they can move those through the process at a fairly reasonable rate. Also, the last couple of years, we've worked closely with our IT folks, and they developed an app for our phones. And if you look on your license, you'll see the QR code on the back. And if you haven't been to a check station or have been checked, we can scan that QR code in, and it populates the screen, and we can mark down what kind of animal you harvested and age, and then we can track the CWD sample that we might collect from that. And that last year we checked in almost 14,000 big game animals and trophy game animals on the Harvest Survey app. Just to give you an idea on that. So it's pretty amazing piece of technology that we have, and it makes it a lot easier for our folks just to scan in that license on a harvested animal and then just mark down that it was a male, female, or how many points it had if it was a deer, and the antler width and that sort of thing. So it's been a real benefit for us to have that IT folks working on something that helps us at the field level. So once hunting season closes, we get into that, what we call the post-hunting season period. And again, we kind of shift our emphasis from being in the field and contacting public to looking a little bit more at what the animals are doing. We'll start some surveys. We'll do siteability surveys. A siteability survey is very similar to the line transect that I showed you with the fixed wing. But what managers do is fly in the helicopter and document group sizes, the activity of the animals and where they're at in a geographic area. And then we'll apply some statistics to that to determine the abundance of that population over a geographic area. And also we, in addition to monitoring wildlife movement and the body condition, the lab work continues with CWD samples. So Hank is busy trying to wrap up the season. Like I said, there were 6,500 samples last year. In addition to that, the tooth lab with services is working hard to finish up those the tooth sample data. Our moose data is often tied to an age structure, as is a number of our metrics that we monitor for big game. And so we're looking at age structure and average ages of animals that come from some of these hunt areas. And then the final thing that we're working on at that point is the harvest survey work really starts kicking off. We have a contract with an outside vendor that contacts a sample of all license holders to determine the number of big game animals that were harvested during the fall. And I think with that, I'll open up for any questions if you guys have.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions for Doug or comments? Thank you very much. At this time, we will be accepting comments on the Via Ferrata. So right now we have Mr. Oakleaf.
Thank you. I have been asked by the citizens of Sinks Canyon for keeping Sinks Canyon wild to come express my opposition to the Via Ferrata. And you folks have a handout that they emailed you before yesterday. I won't spend a lot of time going over that. I might talk off the last picture. So for you folks that I don't know, my name's Bob Oakleaf. I studied Peregrine Falcons for nearly 50 years. 37 of those years I worked for the Game and Fish Department and volunteered another 7 years. During that time, I supervised and participated in the reintroduction of Peregrine Falcons. Actually, it's nearly I think it's about 373 falcons over the years. I also supervised and implemented a monitoring program that monitored the peregrines going from 0 nesting pairs in Wyoming to over 125. I suppose that over the years, I've observed somewhere over 600 nesting attempts by peregrines in the state of Wyoming. And I'm giving you this information because I'd like you to think that I do know something about peregrine falcons, their behavior and their habitat. You don't go out in the state of Wyoming and find one pair without knowing something about them. The last time I presented anything to the Game and Fish Commission was in 2006, where I was recommending that harvest of peregrine falcons in Sinks Canyon was not allowed. And the reason for that, one of the reasons for that was when they're harvesting, the birds are disturbed and there is a lot of focus on Sinks Canyon. And the result is that they move the eyrie and I was hoping that we could get the birds established in one place so they wouldn't move around a lot and conflict with the climbing activity that's taking place. The climbing activity has greatly exploded in Sinks Canyon since that time, but anyway. Maybe you take a quick look at the Via Ferrata picture if you don't have it in your mind, the location of the Via Ferrata. The birds nest on 2 cliffs there, but the picture is of one cliff where they have had 4 nesting ledges and nested this year. And then there's the design of the Via Ferrata there. The issue is not whether or not you can protect the bird for 1 year and have successful fledging. The issue is that once the via ferrata is established and it's used and it accomplishes what the proponents claim, an economic benefit to lander, meaning a lot of people, a lot of use, Peregrine falcons won't use that cliff. It's the way it is, unless there's a mate switch and a new female comes in and is not aware of what goes on that cliff. This site, and one last thing, this site is, I consider it to be the most valuable site in Wyoming, simply because it's easy to observe, it's easy to manage, and it lends itself to an interpretive program that, the Game and Fish could use as one of their watchable wildlife programs, and explain how they participated in the recovery of an endangered species. I know there's a couple other folks that'd like to talk, so I think I'll cut it off here unless somebody has a question.
Mr. Oakley, I appreciate it. Obviously, you're an expert in your field. I have no questions on that. The question I have is how do you know their behavior, since we've never had a via ferrata, have we, anywhere in the state? Or you're
Well,
basing it on other areas that have them?
No, that is a overriding question, and there's several things that cause irritation in me. The via ferrata has not been studied, and people tend to equal it to climbing, and it's not the same impact. It's a commercial development that's, I view it as extremely more disturbing than climbing. It's like the frequency is 100 times more, plus it carves out a section of the cliff where the climbing is going to occur. And we don't, and that's the problem. We do not have data on how a via ferrata affects peregrines, but we do know what peregrines do when there's somebody on top of the cliff or on the cliff or near the eyrie.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr.
President Doobie,
Commissioner Roberts?
Oakley, so how many peregrine falcons are there currently now? And that'll be my first question. I might have a follow-up after that.
Well, when I retired 7 years ago, I knew of 125 pairs in the state, and it's really starting to take off now. What we're seeing is the best habitat filled up, and just like any predator, they're backfilling on marginal habitat types.
How many?
So it's hard to say, right? Really, I'm thinking there's probably easily 200 pairs by now.
In this canyon alone, or the whole state?
Oh, in the whole state.
How many? How are we looking at on this?
In this canyon, there's just that one pair.
Okay.
And there's another pair when nearby on Fossil Hill in a different drainage. But anyway.
Are there any breeding pairs or peregrines in the 10 Sleep Canyon area?
In what area?
10 Sleep Canyon.
Oh, yes, there's at least 2 pairs, maybe 3. The Forest Service is working on a climbing management plan. One person working on a management plan, one person they call their climbing warden.
Yeah, because it is extremely popular.
Oh,
as
it's
far as
amazing
climbing.
what's happened in that
Yeah.
canyon.
Unbelievable.
The pair, it's probably 2 pairs, and they're the one pair that's been there the longest is on a cliff lower down that they don't climb.
Mhm.
Believe it or not. You'd think all the cliffs in 10 Sleep Canyon are climbed, but
Yeah.
not this one yet. I hope they don't find it.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hey, Bob, one question for you. So thank you for coming. Could you, I think it'd be important for the commission to hear your perspective on the restrictions that the department has imposed as a way to mitigate impacts, so they understand where you're at on that.
Well, they haven't quantified anything. And to me, all that is asking for more conflict. You know, before you get into conflict, you quantify what distance they think the disturbance is tolerable. And you run that by people that know peregrines. And you get that conflict out of the way before it actually happens. Anyway, that's the approach I've taken over the years.
So in our recent, the stuff we've recently talked about, we've talked about a half a mile. I mean, is that something you've seen or is that new to you?
No, the half mile is all 7 alternates are within a half mile of the proposed via Ferrata. That half mile, if I don't know what happens if the peregrines are outside that half mile, but they're going to be within that half mile. And if they are, then the Game and Fish decides whether they're too close to the via Ferrata and does it need to be shut down. And that's where I'm saying, if they're going to allow a via Ferrata, they need to get the distance down before that. But all this is baffling to a lot of people because, I mean, are you going to start allowing commercial development and winter range closures during mild winters? You know, there's a lot of, I'd like to guide people in the Wiggins Fork for fishing during mild winters. I'd like to chucker hunt in Red Canyon and guide people during mild winters, but I don't think they're going to change that seasonal closure. And I don't think you should view the land that the commission owns in that same frame of mind in Sinks Canyon. And you know, it's such a value. It's the most accessible eyrie in the state, and lends itself to, like I said, to an interpretive program more so than a commercial jungle gym. So anyway.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I have a question
call.
if we could keep Mr. Oakleaf up.
Absolutely.
Mr. Oakley, thank you for your years of service to the department. And
Sure.
I didn't realize that experienced climbers were already using this rock. And so with the use that this rock's had with experienced climbers and this pair that's been nesting there, have they been successful with that human activity in fledging some young?
Yeah, it's interesting. That cliff is not climbed a lot. For one thing, it's not climbed when early in the season the overflow channel blocks access to it, and it's the access to it's kind of steep and difficult with a pack of climbing stuff. So it's not climbed a lot. In recent years, it's been climbed more, and because of the attention brought to it, and because climbing has just exploded in Sinks Canyon. And, you know, it needs to be managed. The climbing needs to be managed there. That's the other thing the park's talking about, spending $100,000 to build a trail and 2 bridges to access that and improve the access to that cliff, which wasn't in their plan, in order for the Via Ferrata, the tourists, to access the cliff. So to answer your question, it's been a low impact cliff for climbing, especially compared to the other cliffs in the Sinks Canyon. But it's been increasing in the years, and they almost had a failure this year due to they just implemented a voluntary climbing, and some people didn't recognize the voluntary climbing rather than a complete closure, and they went up at fledging time, and the young got flushed out of the nest and spent 10 days on the ground, which is not the best situation. So I could go on with climbing. There's a whole bunch of disturbance with peregrines, but I better let the other folks talk. You guys are behind schedule anyway.
Thank you.
Anyway, unless there's.
Thank you. Mr. Almas, hopefully I said that correctly.
say it correctly. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to comment today. My name's Will Almus. I am an adjacent landowner to the state park. I live in Sinks Canyon, and we live right at the mouth of Sawmill Creek. And if you're familiar at all with that area, you'll know that those two canyons are steeply incised canyons. Both Sawmill and the Sinks Canyon, or the Proposia River, are very narrow, right where they connect. Now, this is the very spot that the master plan proposes to relocate the visitor center with associated parking, and the Via Ferrata, including a bridge and a path and support facilities for this concessionaire. So I can tell you that there is a lot of wildlife. It gets wild fast when you get away from that highway. We've had, just this season, we've seen bear, cougars, osprey, bald eagles, golden eagles, just to name the big ones, and of course, a bunch of deer. There's no place for those, and because there are cliffs on all sides, that is a wildlife corridor. The master plan, of which the Via Ferrata is part of, as far as my reading, basically has no analytical information in it that would indicate that the Wyoming Game and Fish Department did an analysis. It looks like opinion. The only two reports that are part of the master plan are a SHPO report for cultural and a plant list that was provided. It's just a list. So I believe that there will be impacts to wildlife migration based on my own observations. You are in a unique situation. You're the landowner of the majority of Sinks Canyon State Park. They're 585 acres, I believe, or 65. And you have over 85% of that. You're the landowner, and you're also the agency that is responsible for the conservation of wildlife. That's in your charter, and it's also part of the underlying documents where transfer of property and acceptance of federal funds initially for the acquisition of that property. So regardless of, we're advised that this does require commission approval, regardless of whether it does or doesn't. Seems to me it is something that the commission should weigh in on. It's an important issue. This is not a controversy over economic development versus preservation or conservation of wildlife. In my mind, this is a matter of stewardship of the resources that we have in the canyon. They're the very attributes that attract people to the canyon. If you destroy those, then people will not have the same quality of experience and might even stop coming. So I would like you, I'm asking you to ask the staff to show you the studies, show me the analysis, show me the meat behind this plan, this master plan. And then I would hope that the process could be reopened and that the analysis be done. Now, if you can find that analysis and it can be presented to the public, which it has not, fine, let's look at it. And there should be public comment. But if it isn't there, it should be there, and it should be completed. So I ask you to, you're going to probably hear more about this when you have your next month's meeting in Riverton. So I would ask that in the interim, you do a little homework, you figure out whether what I say and what Bob Oakleaf have to say has validity, And then you take some action at that time or, decide how you want to go on this.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Alamos? Thank you very much. Senator Case, is he online or? Senator Case, you there?
Yes, Mr. President. Yes, I am.
Thank you. You're on the screen.
Thank you, President Doobie. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and the commission and the director today. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to the two gentlemen that spoke before me. I have been following this issue quite closely, but I really became involved when I felt that some of the comments of some senior former members.
Senator Case, excuse me for a second. We're having difficulty hearing you. Is there any way we can get that volume higher?
I'll wait.
I guess we'll just do the best we can.
I apologize for the audio. I'll try to speak up on my end.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm probably shaking the hotel room next door, but it's okay. Thanks again for letting me speak. I was just saying that I became involved in this when I realized that the state parks master plan process was very inadequate and that some very important views were being discounted, most particularly some of the really senior folks in Lander that have a wildlife background, including Mr. Oakleaf that spoke previously, were just totally being ignored on this issue. And I was certainly asked to participate in the master plan process, and but then it kind of fell off the radar screen, sir. And literally I responded that I couldn't keep up with the meetings, but that I was concerned about overdevelopment in the park, and I wanted that to be part of the record of the master plan process. That actually never happened. There was a retirement of Mary Flundurka, and my comments never got into master plan. And that's the way a lot of people felt, that the process was very inadequate and that things were discounted. And in fact, it was loaded towards a series of secret meetings with commercial entities that wanted to promote the Via Ferrata. This is where we came today. And my main concerns are fairly simple. One is I feel that this is totally out of sync with the cooperative agreements that the Game and Fish has entered into with managing the park. And most particularly, the cooperative agreements describe a primary use will be to provide wintering habitat for mule deer and bighorn sheep commonly residing in or near the area. That's the primary use. The secondary use of this area, this wildlife management area, is to provide habitat for all wildlife residing in the area and wildlife recreation opportunities such as fishing, hunting, and other compatible wildlife recreation activities by the public. The Via Ferrata and the master plan proposal of locating the visitor center in this really important narrow choke point of the front of the canyon isn't met with those two criteria. And so I challenge the Game and Fish to return to the primary and secondary missions of this wildlife management area. It is an important wildlife corridor, and we need to protect it as such. It's not just about peregrines, but there's an amazing story there. As near as I can tell, this is the most successful reintroduction site that we know of in Wyoming. The most successful nesting pairs over time from the Game and Fish. I learned that there's been 56 productive or new birds coming out of this site. That is the experience that this cliff should support to our visiting public. Wildlife worth the watching. My gosh, this is the place. This is the place. I don't think that we can move from these primary and secondary uses without the approval of the Game and Fish Commission. And I think section 23 of your rules would require that approval. A legal team that has been engaged by the citizens also would seem to indicate that the Game and Fish Commission approval would be required for any change here. And with these, I hope we will look at this closely. I also just challenged the ability to manage this. I know that it sounds very good that we can have compatible uses with a via ferrata by having a period of closure when the falcons are selecting their nesting sites, and then maintain it. If they do come, then keep it closed until they've successfully fledged and have done their stuff. I just challenge that premise. It sounds really good on paper, but they're not independent actions, I don't think. The use of the cliff by the via ferrata will discourage nesting in the future. And so one thing leads to another. They might make it this year, they might make it that year. And then I want to point out to you guys, I'm a private businessman myself. And I've had some tough years in Wyoming. Let me just say that I'm in the tourism business. I own the Inn at Lander, in Lander. I love our visiting public, of course, but I want to tell you what it's like when you're in business and it gets really tough. And I want to liken it to, what if you have invested in a via ferrata and you're facing these closures or interference from the falcons? You may love the falcons, but you're going to love your business more. And if there's any conceivable way that you can discourage or have someone discourage or figure out a way that in the future, falcons won't come back to that cliff, because in your mind, they're not that important. You cite data that they nest in big cities and they're recovered now. So they are, I guess, nice, but if they start interfering with your business, people that are in trouble in their business do face difficult decisions. Let me just say that. So I just challenge the ability for this to go as well as people have assumed. So I don't think you can manage it. And secondly, I just think it violates everything that you stand for in terms of the wildlife areas there. I realize it's ran by state parks. I certainly realize that we are facing in the past 2 years with COVID, just an amazing demand for our resources around the state. But I think state parks has got this one screwed up, and that you're kind of going along with them, and I hope you'll rethink it, because unlike a marina or Hot Springs State Park, which has hotels and all this stuff, Sinks Canyon is a little bit of a different animal. And every document that you can ever read about the finding or the founding and what the purpose was to protect wildlife. And this development activity and the master plan, which proposes to a visitor center, parking lots on both sides of this very narrow spot in the canyon in the middle of the migration corridor, is just inadequate. And finally, I'll close by returning to the process. This is in my district. I didn't know about this till just a couple of months ago. And the reason I really became involved is because there were folks in state agencies, not the Game and Fish, that were discounting the opinions of some very senior, important people that had served the state of Wyoming well, Mr. Oakleaf being one of them, and considered Mr. Oakleaf is a huge expert on peregrines. He's better than anybody anywhere that I know of. He consults to other states. I really think we should listen to him. Mr. President, I'm very grateful for your indulgence today. Thank you to all. And thanks for all the work you guys do. I want to just say that. And Director Nesbitt, I also put my hats off to you. He met with me about a month ago or so, and he's been very generous and good to work with, as have all your people.
Thank you very much, Senators. Any questions for the Senator? We appreciate your insight and your input, and I'm sure we'll be discussing it further. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. President. I'm hoping to stay around for the awards. 2 of the awards that are being given, the service awards, are to folks from Lander, and I would like to give them an attaboy if I could. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the floor?
Did you want to take a break?
We'll take a 10-minute break, please. Okay, we're going to postpone 7 for a little bit and that move down to number 8 on the agenda in the awards and recognition. So, and then once we do this, we will take the pictures during the luncheon. So we'll move on that perspective. So Angie?
President Doobie, Commissioners, Angie Bruce, Deputy Director. As you recall, back in January, you guys challenged other folks to step up to the plate to make donations to wildlife crossings in Wyoming. So today I have the honor of turning it over to Commissioner Jelovich, who will present a donation to the KC to Buffalo I-25 project.
Big check.
Mr. President, Commissioners, this is Jace McNamee. He is here representing Goshen County Rooster Boosters and the Goshen County Two-Shot Goose Hunt with a couple of checks for the Wildlife Crossing to Buffalo, KC.
Thank you, guys. I'd just like to, on behalf of the Goshen County Two-Shot and the Rooster Booster, we'd like to express our continued support of the conservation efforts of the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission and the state of Wyoming. We think this is a great project and we appreciate all that you guys do and like to show our gratitude with a donation of $20,000 from both the Two-Shot Goose Hunt and the Goshen County Rooster Booster. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Pictures afterwards,
Where to?
just right outside this door. What's the back?
During lunch?
Yep, just right before lunch.
All right, thank you.
All right, Mr. President, members of the commission, we've got a couple of awards here today for this year. We actually, on an annual basis, the department receives and the senior leadership team receives nominations for teams around the department that do great things for both our public and our mission of conserving wildlife and serving people. And this year we had a couple nominations that we believe both were very worthy and fitting of this honor. And so we're actually going to recognize 2 teams of the year for 2020 here today. We've got many of the employees, not all of the employees, but we have many of the employees that are a part of these teams here with us today. And so I'm gonna start with the larger of the 2, which is the Cwd Management Team, and I'll talk a little bit about why they were nominated and why we feel they're so worthy of being recognized by the department and the commission here today. I'm going to go ahead and read their names first, and I'm going to ask those that are here in attendance today to go ahead and join me up here at the podium. So the Cwd Management Team members are Brad Hovengay, Corey Klass, Bart Kroger, Justin Dodd, Chris Baird, Lee Knox, Greg Anderson, Justin Benfett, Janet Millick, Hank Edwards, and Dr. Mary Wood, who's our former veterinarian, and then our current veterinarian, Dr. Samantha Allen, and also Deputy Chief Ed Berg. So I'd ask all of you please to join me up here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why they were nominated and why they're so worthy. So as all of you know, CWD is one of the biggest challenges facing our state. And back, several years ago, we began a journey of trying to put together a new updated CWD management plan. And obviously it required a tremendous amount of outreach to the public. It required a tremendous amount of evaluation of the science, of digging deep into anything new, anything that was out there, anything that was available that we could apply to the situation here in Wyoming. And there is no silver bullet. The commission's wrestled with this for years, but the commission was adamant, the department was adamant that sitting on our hands and doing absolutely nothing because we couldn't find a silver bullet was just not an option. And so this team went to work. And at the end of the day, they developed a management plan that outlines all kinds of different disease surveillance strategies, different types of way to manage the disease, not eliminate, but manage it, ways to communicate with the public, ways to address CWD not only in mule deer and whitetail, but also in other species like elk and very occasionally in moose. This was their charge. They did it brilliantly. They put together and worked with a large group of publics to do this. Some of it was very controversial. And they just, with a lot of talent, masterfully moved through this process. The team that, you know, we talk about having these different citizen groups come together. This one was a big one, 31 members on this group. And it included elected officials, wildlife-based NGOs, outfitters, landowners, hunters, the general public. They worked over a year to come up with these recommendations. And again, kind of like what we see with a lot of these other groups, it takes a lot of work, a lot of hard deliberation, a lot of disagreement, a lot of contention to get through these things. And they did an outstanding job. You know, towards the end of their work, that's when we were faced with the additional challenges of COVID-19, and they adapted, they overcame, and they continued on and did an outstanding job with putting this plan together that was presented to you. And you know, I personally want to just thank each one of these folks, those that are here and those that are not able to attend today, for, you know, really representing our department in just exceptional fashion. I mean, this is the way this is the standard we set for ourselves, that when we face tough problems, we don't bury our head in the sand, we don't sit on our hands, we go out and we try to do whatever we can to tackle it. And they exceeded expectations. So I'd just ask you to join me in congratulating all these folks. We'll do pictures right after this. Did you want to say something? Okay. Yeah, Scott just clarified for me. I didn't have it on my page here, but I do see that it's on the plaque. I missed Game Warden Jordan Kraft, who's also a member of the team. He's not here today, but he's also a member of the team.
I could just say a quick word.
Absolutely.
So I just want to say, you know, working with these people and the public was great. They took this challenge on full steam ahead. And as we know, this was CWD is a tough deal, both in Wyoming and nationwide. And the success of this plan and CWD in Wyoming is this team and all the other field folks. So I just want to say thanks to them for digging in their heels and doing what's expected. And they came out with a very solid and scientific based plan that'll hopefully shape Wyoming CWD management into the future. And as you know, we're continuing on with this. We've got some projects in the hopper to actually start some field work. And again, it's based on the field folks, and I truly appreciate their efforts. Thanks, Brian.
Well done. Thank you.
All right, the next team I want to talk about, it's a little bit smaller, but equally as important. As the commission knows, access and the access that the department provides around the state is one of the highest priorities for sportsmen. We got a group of folks here that really put their heads down and went to work to try to improve our abilities to provide that access. And you know, one of the challenges we have is limited resources to pay for it, but we also have limited human resources for those folks who are out on the ground negotiating these contracts, enforcing the rules on our department provided access on private land and public. And so, you know, the only way sometimes you can expand that capacity when you can't put more humans on the ground is by making their jobs easier and by gaining efficiencies. And that's really what this next team is all about. And so I'm going to ask Robin Arndt, Tom Graham, Denise Jensen, Laura Service, and Kathy Weiss to join me up here. These were nominated. These folks were nominated by the regional access coordinators, who are those folks that have really primarily on the front end been benefited, but at the end of the day, the outcome and the consequences, Wyoming sportsmen have benefited from all of these folks' work. These individuals all came together during a very difficult year, again, 2020, the whole challenge of COVID. to put their heads down and figure out how to update the hunter management area permission slip system, renewing a majority of the access yes agreements, and then also finding new mapping functionalities that would really enhance the abilities of the regional access coordinators to do their jobs. This, for those of you that have had the opportunity to hunt on a hunter management area before, there's a process where you go onto our website and you can go in there and select the area that you want to hunt. Some of them are limited, and so it requires a pretty good, pretty complex computer program to be able to sort out and allow for, you know, some places to be a draw, some places they're unlimited, some places are only for certain dates. So it's fairly complicated, and the system we were using was old. These folks figured out a way to build a new system, update it, and make it so that it was viewable by all the entities that needed to be able to view it, including our dispatch center down in Cheyenne, including all of the field offices, our office managers, and their improvements here were huge. The other thing they did is they partnered with and figured out how to use third-party GIS organizations like Onyx Hunt Maps. Many of you probably used that app before, and they went to work and they looked at producing agreements for the Attorney General's office to use this third party and to incorporate it into our access program and in these improvements that they were offering for our field people. The other thing that these folks did was they looked at, on an annual basis, they have over 500 different agreements they have to look at between landowners and the department. And all of these agreements went through the hands of Robin. And this is stuff that used to have to be handled by the field, but now they have taken on, this team has taken on. Laura was part of this, and Laura's service here in updating and modifying the old PLPW database. That's what we used to call it, to make it much more user-friendly and streamlined. And Laura also helped again with the 2020 contract season to provide a new updated information for a database that could be used by all. Very complex, you know, not only from an information technology standpoint, but from a budgeting standpoint. A lot of complexities here that they had to work through, having to work through the complexities of laws and the Attorney General's office review and trying to get everything legally right. But at the end of the day, again, I think the bottom line here is because of their work, because of them, again, representing our department so professionally and in such a mission-focused manner, that our folks are able to provide the sportsmen and women of Wyoming with more opportunity and more access. And so very proud of them. Personal thanks to all of you. Congratulations. All right, Mr. President, I think I have one more. I think we have a couple folks, correct me if I'm wrong, Deputy Director Kennedy, we have two that did not make it that we did. So we're on Alan. All right, so I have the honor to be able to present Alan Big Fish Osterlin, the Chief of the Fish Division, with his 35-year service award. Alan, would you please join me up here at the podium? So as many of you know, I think most of you know Alan, and you know that he is by far one of the most talented and seasoned wildlife professionals we have in the agency. He has an extremely diverse background. He started out as a habitat and access technician working on our WHMAs around the state. He was a game warden in multiple districts. He was a wildlife investigator for a period of time, and he was known as a sleuthy bad guy catcher that worked more than most human beings could even imagine. In fact, Alan probably in his early days could have got the department in trouble because he worked so much it put us in jeopardy with some of the employment laws because he would work so many hours every month. You know, he was After he was a game warden in several places, he ended up being a wildlife regional supervisor in Cody. And then did something that I'm not aware of that's ever happened in our history, and competed for and was selected to be the chief of fisheries. And he's been doing that now for about the last 5 years and has just done an exceptional job there. He is one of those folks that you'll see a common thread with a lot of our most successful folks in the agency, who has just tremendous interpersonal skills. He can talk to anybody. He doesn't avoid conflict. He's accommodating to folks. He understands who he works for, the public of Wyoming. And he exemplifies that in everything that he does. He's an exceptional leader. I mean, imagine taking over the fish division when he grew up in a completely different team. And he's done that in exceptional fashion, and has garnered the respect of those folks in his division. He's a team player, and now he's on the senior leadership team, and he's oftentimes asked to take off his fish division hat and think on behalf of the entire department. And he does that extremely well. I'm going to talk about a few of Alan's little vulnerabilities here. It's important for you to know some of those as well. But the other thing is he's a real practical joker. So I know going into what I'm about to say that for about the next 6 months, I gotta be watching out, because something's probably coming my way. But here's a couple of things that a lot of people may not know about Alan. Is he is called, where is Alan? Come on, I want, not right behind me, right here. He's known as the big fish for a reason. It's because he's actually a really good fisherman. But the one thing that most folks don't know is when he doesn't get to be the best fisherman in the boat, he pouts like a little kid. And if he happens to be the driver, he'll just leave. It doesn't matter if you're out fishing him and having a great time and catching fish, he'll just leave. It doesn't matter what you say. Hey, Alan, I'm still fishing. Okay, well, you control it 40 miles an hour. The other thing that is interesting about Alan, Commissioner Brokaw can really attest to this as well. He has these weird witchcraft superstitions, like that if you have chocolate donuts in the boat or in the truck or in the hunting blind with you, that your whole mojo's off and you will never catch anything and you will never have any luck hunting. He's literally taken Ralph and I's donuts and throwing them out the window going down the highway before, because he's so superstitious about these chocolate donuts. He always says that it's some proven witchcraft thing, but anyway, I'm not in. Here's the other thing many people probably don't know is he was actually my training officer. And so when you find fault in my actions and my performance, I think you can trace it back in some ways to Mr. Osterland over here, because he had an early impression on me. And there was a day when I really looked up to Alan and thought he was great. He does the other thing. I got to get in the first shot, because he's also a story embellisher. He oftentimes can make things, he'll tell a story and it seems like he's really sincere and it's all very truthful. But oftentimes he's got it a little bit wrong and it's a little bit embellished. I just want to say that now, knowing that you're going to all have opportunity to be around him tonight. But here, at the end of the day, Alan, congratulations, 35 years to one of the best teams in the world, and represented our department in just exceptional fashion all that time. He's one of my most trusted advisors. I trust him implicitly. He has the utmost character and integrity, and I hope that I'm able to see him get his 40-year service device.
Good rock.
Thank you very much. Katie, you want to say something before we break for lunch here? Okay, we will break for lunch and we'll be back at 1. And we will take, for the award winners, we'll be taking pictures out in the hallway here. So thank you.
Fantastic. Here we go.
Pardon me?
Welcome back.
Yeah, I
I'd like to
so.
thank the Sheep Foundation for a lovely lunch. Appreciate it. Would you like to say a word to Katie?
President Doobie, Director Nesbitt, Commissioners. My name is Katie Cheesebro. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation. And we just wanted to provide you guys with lunch today to thank you for your time and your commitment to Wyoming's wildlife and everything you do. We know this is not a small time commitment and it's a lot of work. So we appreciate what you do for Wyoming's wildlife, especially our bighorn sheep. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get back into our agenda. Number 7, Micah.
President Doobie, Commission, and Director Nesbitt, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to discuss the Laramie Peak Wildlife Habitat Management Area. There you go. That work? All right. Within the Laramie region, there are 11 wildlife habitat management areas. Laramie-based management encompasses the Laramie Peak, Wick Brothers Brumé, Jelm, Tom Thorne, Beth Williams, Forbes, Sheep Mountain, and Pilot Hill. Saratoga-based management encompasses the Pennock, the Red Rim Grizzly, and the Yoder management encompasses Springer Bump Sullivan, Table Mountain, and Cottonwood Draw. Today, we'll be discussing the Laramie Peak, the second largest WHMA in the Laramie region. Sorry. There we go. This is the southeast portion of the state. The yellow boundary is the Laramie region. And the green dots are the location of the WHMAs within. In the northern central portion of the region is where you will see the Laramie Peak WHMA location. It's a new public land information sign that GIS created for all the new entrances to the WHMA. The thicker green line delineates the WHMA boundary. Crosshash highlights the winter closure areas within the unit and several other features informing the public on the WHMA. Laramie Peak WHMA is located 15 miles south of Laramie Peak and 40 miles west of Wheatland. It was purchased in 1971 to provide winter range primarily for bighorn sheep, but also for the management for elk and mule deer, pronghorn, fish, and many other wildlife species. The unit provides hunting, fishing, and recreational opportunities year-round. Start the video, please. There we go. I know you all know the department is filled with great individuals, and within this presentation, I would like to show you some of the work that's going on. For example, Thomas Koenig, our GIS technician, recently took the time to meet me on the peak on a windy day, known to man, and shot this dynamic bird's eye view. So you have a visual of the landscape that encompasses this beautiful country. In August, as you can see, the peak's drainages maintain their lush, palatable vegetation. Outside of the watersheds, though, the vegetation has become dry and the growing season has ended. Smoke is in the air here. Fear of wildfire is heavy. Soon freezing temperatures and a blanket of snow will put those fears to rest and transform this landscape lush beauty into a frozen one. I'd like to highlight work that has taken place in the past. I think I should start by acknowledging the people who came before. Without the passion for wildlife, habitat, and public access to the wild, there would be no Laramie Peak WHMA, so thank you to all of you who have been or currently are one of those people. I feel incorporating historic departmental knowledge into this presentation is important, so I reached out to 2 people I know who have a history with the unit. Both come from different perspectives, and both were a part of the Game and Fish during the Peak acquisition. Walt Gasson is a retired game and fish wildlife biologist who worked for the department for 30 years, and his historic knowledge of the unit over the past 6 years that I've been with the department has been paramount and key to my understanding. Art Reese worked for the Game and Fish Department for 25 years, first as assistant land specialist and then became land specialist. He then spent 18 years as division chief of research and development and habitat and technical services before he worked in federal programs. The Laramie Peak WHMA was purchased for winter range. Reese Mountain was named after Art's grandfather, who herded sheep up there at the turn of the century. Collaboration between divisions and commission was key. In the past, acquisitions were much more simple. The Peak was an anomaly because it was a perfect combination of access and habitat. Access to the Vail Ranch tied together BLM, state, and Forest Service, which tripled the size of the unit. The priority was access to Reese Mountain and enclosed lands, which put it to the top of that short list. Then following, the department had to choose which of the Kennedy properties they wanted, and they chose Jack's Place, which is what the Laramie Peak WHMA Patrol Cabin House is still known by today. At the time, there was no federal aid requirement, nor was there a state requirement for public hearing or notices. The public notification was proposal that went before the commission 3 times. There was no request, no comments, and no hearings. Wyoming Wildlife Federation was the only conservation group at that time that would support an acquisition in Wyoming. National conservation groups didn't support Wyoming acquisitions. However, after the huge acquisition that was the Laramie Peak WHMA, federal groups started paying attention, and then federal funding required comments, hearings, and requests, etc. Truly, the department's goal in acquiring the Peak was access to and conservation of bighorn sheep and public access in general. Once they had the unit, they saw that they had to improve mule deer habitat as much work was needed. Initial projects included disking side hills, prescribed burns, and fertilization, all directed at sagebrush and aspens. Chaining of aspens was also a frequent tool used to enhance mule deer habitat, though priority was bighorn sheep. What stood out the most to both Walt and Art in our discussions was the evolution of recreation. For example, in 1965, Knowles, which is a national outdoor leadership school, started a trend in rock climbing, which began in Vidavoo, then migrated to the Peak several years later. Technology had advanced recreation as well. Original public land recreational signs didn't pertain to everything that is happening right now, as they were designated for foot traffic and horseback only. Earlier, I mentioned access to the Vail Ranch being important. As you can see, the Vail Ranch is a close neighbor to Jack's Place. Not only is this convenient when they or we need assistance, but this shows the close relationship between the Kennedys and the Game and Fish on the WHMA. What you see is captured directly over commission-owned property, ranging approximately 50 to 150 feet in the air. This is just a fraction of the overall beauty, size, and scale of the unit. But I wanted to provide you with an image of the landscape if you haven't ever visited this area or the WHMA. As you can see, grasslands to timber with elevations as low as 6,800 feet to the upwards of 8,300 feet on top of Reese. Inside the WHMA unit, there are approximately 14, sorry, let me skip back one. There we go. I got to get used to the delay. Inside the WHMA unit, there are approximately 1,400 acres of fee title lands, 4,600 acres of permanent easement through private property, 3,700 state lease acres, 2,600 acres of BLM, and the greatest amount of public access is provided within the Vail Ranch, which is approximately 24,000 acres. Martin Hicks, the Laramie Region Wildlife Coordinator, has been instrumental in the efforts positively benefiting this WHMA. He stated the ruggedness combined with the remoteness in combination with recent fire activities provides a unique and diverse mix of habitat types that benefit not only big game animals, but black bears, mountain lions, wild turkeys, dusky grouse, and a whole host of non-game animals as well. Thus is the reason for the winter closure. There are isolated tracts of private lands remaining within this area, as you saw in prior slides. 5 Game and Fish maintained parking areas, which have a 5-day camping limit, and off-road travel is restricted to 25 feet. The Laramie Peak WHMA is also a conduit for approximately 7,000 acres outside the boundary fence. The whole goal here is to provide maximum benefits to wildlife and public. We address current issues by keeping in direct communication with those involved with the management of the unit. For example, BLM, state, Albany County Weed and Pest when there are noxious weed concerns, and the Vale Ranch when other management concerns arise. The Vale Ranch runs approximately 350 head on the unit. They also fertilize approximately 160 acres of meadow. We work to control public so use doesn't interfere with our overall goal, and to do so while keeping public safety as a priority. As you can see in the slide, each division's goals are all structured around other divisions within the department, creating a holistic approach to management for everyone. For example, H&A duties consist of reservoir maintenance, dam and spillway upkeep, which directly benefit the fisheries. The fish division are constantly working towards maintaining the brook trout population in the pond, which in turn creates a satisfactory public experience for anglers. Each WHMA has an MLAS, Management Land Access Summary, and goals and objectives are highlighted within, and each division within the department works together to achieve those goals. In the prior slide, I discussed habitat and access tasks, and sign maintenance is one of those. We have approximately 120 signs, 120 plus signs within the WHMA boundaries to aid in the public information, access, and safety. See if we can get this video to operate here. Thank you. Along the lines of internal collaboration and everyone working together, I would like to acknowledge those individuals who have worked many hours, not only to collar, but capture wildlife on trail cams in order for us to be able to track and monitor population trends and studies. Chris Martin, our Game and Fish digital content creator, captured these great videos, and this is just a fraction of what he's got all within the WHMA boundaries. The majority of sheep harvest occurs on either the WHMA, Forest Service, or private lands adjacent to the WHMA. The Reese wildfire that burned 19,000 acres in 2002 opened up significant portions of Reese, Split Rock, and Pine Mountains to further enhance the area for suitable sheep habitat. There have been 7 bighorn sheep augmentations since 1964. 2 of the augmentations occurred on the Laramie Peak WHMA, 42 sheep in 1964 and 42 sheep in 2007. Currently, there are approximately 50 bighorn sheep within this area and approximately 300 within the Laramie Peak herd unit. I'll offer you a description. Everyone helping out is bundled in full winter gear. We wait for the capture crew. Once we hear those chopper blades, we put down our suspended net, sometimes 2 or 3 sheep to the ground. The flight crew has hobbled their hooves and placed blinders over their eyes to keep them calm. Once the net has been released from the helicopter, the crew is off in search of the next capture. Meanwhile, those of us waiting on the ground move in to hold down the sheep to keep them calm for data processing. This process entails gathering a blood sample, body temperature, fecal matter, size, age, gender, and affixing a GPS collar for future tracking on the animal. Once all this information has been entered onto the data sheet, a brave volunteer who is willing to risk a hind leg kick removes the blinder and hobbles and gently nudges that sheep free. In the 6 years that I've been with the department, I have assisted with 2 bighorn sheep captures, both in January, one calm and sunny, favorable temperatures, and the other frigid. If you ever have the opportunity to assist, I definitely recommend it. The experience working with both landowners, their family and friends and coworkers in a unique field setting in order to gather vital information is educational and unmatched. I would not understand the process as well as I do, as a report or a video does not do the experience justice. I got the opportunity to feel how strong this animal truly is and how warm their body is, especially in the Arctic weather that can be our environment. It's a fun job. Collar data shows that between May 1st to June 15th, the Hay Canyon location is extremely popular. Same goes for June 1st through August 31st. Now, look at the most popular time frame: December 1st to April 30th. This information is precisely why the seasonal closure to this area is so important. And another collaborative nod. This year, Dan Bjornley, large carnivore biologist, and his team, Ryan Kinderman, Emily Holst, they must be recognized for their efforts being able to collar 6 black bears on the unit. In 2022, the black bear team will return to the WHMA with hair snares and additional collars to continue trapping black bears on the unit. I would like to emphasize the importance of the WHMA to sports persons for deer, elk, and bighorn sheep hunting opportunities. The WHMA provides elk in crucial winter, spring, summer, fall, year-long, and parturition areas. The WHMA houses nearly 300 mule deer, 75 elk, and 150 antelope. Regional folks in our fish division add to the list of department employees striving to maintain fishing opportunities on the peak. The Laramie Peak WHMA encompasses 11 miles of the Laramie River. When talking with Steve Gell, our Laramie regional fish biologist, he informed me that this stretch of river is extremely crucial to the survival of the horny head chub, not only within the Laramie River, but in the North Laramie and Sweetwater rivers. Currently, there is a project taking place on the dam, and current threats include sedimentation and dewatering from diversion dam operation project, plus predation by non-native game species as well. Rock climbing throughout the unit is a highly sought after opportunity, and Duck Creek has systems that require ropes and technical rock climbing. Arrowhead hunting is popular on the unit as well. If you scout around the Laramie Peak WHMA, Dothat Mountain has caves. Reese Mountain has artifacts that show Paleo Indians were present in the area. Sorry. In the 80s, some of the unit managers even pulled out Spanish helmets and chest plates. The arrowheads and artifacts, they show that habitat has always been good and hunting was obviously prevalent. Though you can't guarantee there's going to be a pile of bulls for a blue ribbon shed hunting area, as Walt Gasson says, it does have the accessibility, and in that part of the world, there's a lot of places that you can't get to. Rocky trails into Duck Creek lead to Duck Creek Falls, which boasts a 100-foot waterfall during peak flow of runoff. The game and fish infrastructure and facilities within this unit include fences, roads, culverts, cattle guards, all the things involved with the travel system. The patrol cabin, which is Jack's place, outbuildings, barns and sheds, 7 water guzzlers, and signs, as I mentioned before. In 2020, as Director Nesbitt stated, following a significant amount of hard work and collaboration by many, we were able to secure a unique contract allowing the Army National Guard to utilize Game and Fish WHMAs as a training site to assist with the Army National Guard's annual 2-week training exercise. And not only provide the location, but projects that directly assist in their hands-on training. The Army National Guard provided both a vertical and a horizontal crew. The horizontal crew completed maintenance of 11 miles of road, 5 cattle guards, and installed 8 24-inch culverts. They also added gravel, graded roads, raised road beds to aid in runoff. And as an engineer support company, they were able to complete a broad range of work, including earth moving and vertical construction projects. The Army National Guard helped us complete tasks that would have taken us a long time for our regional staff. The Laramie Peak Patrol Cabin has withstood time, but needed to be brought to code. So the Army National Guard vertical crew was able to bring the light fixtures, outlets, and breaker boxes up to code. They also plumbed in a bathroom in the basement, finish a basement by hanging sheetrock and running water lines to the bathroom and wiring in a washer and dryer. The barn also got rewired and new lighting. Game and Fish employees worked together during this project to build the north side deck, install 2 egress windows, and plan to finish a basement by painting and flooring improvements. Working alongside the Army National Guard was by far one of the highlights of the summer, let alone my 6 years being part of the department. Our Habitat and Access crew is currently working out a timeline to complete the Army National Guard's great start on upgrades to the patrol cabin. We also will upgrade and improve roads within the commission-owned property and WHMA. Also, our wildlife, fish, and other divisions will certainly continue doing the good work they've been doing thus far. Currently, we have a boundary fence conversion project taking place, which converts fences to wildlife-friendly specifications. The project is set up in several phases, with the first 3 years to replace 10 miles between Wyoming Game and Fish Commission lands, Vail Ranch, Palmer Canyon, and other areas on the WHMA. Current challenges include continued removal of old fence, maintenance of roads and facilities, the eradication of invasive plants, and increased public use, including the evolution of technology such as UTVs, drones, weapon technology, e-bikes, things of such. The majesty and history of the Laramie Peak WHMA are unmatched. We are tasked with preserving this treasured land for the future. Here you can see the reason why I do it. My children know and love spending time on the Laramie Peak WHMA. Aiden, Kian, and Maeve, they may know it as Dad's job. It's much more than a job to me. I'm trying to instill a love of nature and the wild that we are lucky enough to call home. As Art Reese eloquently said, the WHMA was critical for previous generations and is for the future. It continues to surprise. Thank you, President Doobie, Commission, and Director Nesbitt for your time, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to showcase the Laramie Peak WHMA. Do you have any questions for me?
Wonderful presentation.
Very nice,
Any
thanks.
questions or comments? It's a wonderful resource. Very
Awesome.
fortunate to have it.
President Doobie, Commission, Director Nesbitt, thank you.
Awesome.
I guess
Commissioner Roberts?
Guess I have one. Could you go over on the figures? Sorry about that, on how many elk, antelope, and everything's on that again? I kind of missed that.
Yes, sir. President Doobie, members of the commission, and Commissioner Roberts. 300, approximately 300 bighorn sheep in the Laramie Peak herd unit, approximately 50 bighorn sheep within the unit boundaries, 150 pronghorn, 50 elk, and I better check my numbers here. Hold on one second. Let me just be accurate.
Yeah, 50 elk is a variable number.
It's a variable number, correct? Yeah.
As of yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, 50 elk.
how many deer? What do we figure?
It says, well, according to the research that I've done, approximately 75. But I personally, it's more. It's a variable number.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of missed that.
Thank you, Micah.
Thank you.
Chief Phipps? You're around. Oh, is he out there?
No.
Mhm.
You got a little song for us, Commissioner Brokaw?
A song? I do not have a song. I have a question for Micah while we wait.
Go ahead.
Micah, have you ever hiked into Duck Creek?
President Doobie, members of the commission, Commissioner Brokaw. I have, but I was 18. I caught my very first fish on a fly rod there on Duck Creek Flats, which is south of the falls. I've seen the falls, but it's been a long time.
I haven't seen the falls, but I got to tour that HMA with the game warden once. And we hiked down into Duck Creek Canyon and he about killed me.
Yeah, it's intense. Yeah.
It's an incredible country.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. Beautiful.
Just
Welcome
wake
the
up.
former fiscal chief.
Thank you, Director. President Doobie, members of the commission. Today, we've got 3 transactions with licensed selling agents. 2 are non-sporting goods. 1 is a sporting goods, 2 are transfers, and 1's a new licensed selling agent. Rips Grocery of Evanston will be transferring to Fast Stop. There's 2 other agents located in Evanston. Temporary authority was granted in July. Rips Groceries total were almost $33,000 a year. Lake Stop in Buffalo is a sporting goods licensed selling agent. The store's sales in 2020 were $7,798. And then we have Alta Convenience Store in Green River. There's 4 licensed selling agents in Green River, and the total sales in Green River amongst those 4 was $219,549. Recommendation is that the commission vote to approve the new appointment of Alta Convenience Store and the transfer of Lake Stop and Rips Grocery Store to Fast Stop.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Phipps? I entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I'd move to approve the 3 LSA requests by Chief Phipps.
Well, second.
Moved by Commissioner Brokaw, second by Commissioner Byrd to accept the department's recommendations. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And still Chief Phipps. Mr. McBarnes.
Director Nesbitt, President Doobie, members of the commission, thank you all so much for having me here today. Chris McBarnes, and I'm proud to be associated with the Wildlife Fund. My wife tells me often that brevity is a virtue, so we're going to keep this moving along and keep it nice and crisp for you folks. So today I'm going to do a brief recap on our evenings of note, which I know most of you attended, and we really appreciate you all taking the time to travel and be a part of those. Secondly, I want to give you some updates on our Golf for Wildlife event. This is our first annual event that was held at the end of July in Buffalo. And then we also have a small grant presentation to make for Inspire a Kid, Director Nesbitt's program. So our evenings of note, being a one-man show, I kind of underestimated the amount of work and logistics it would take to put on all 6 of these evenings and do it seamlessly. But I'm proud to say that all 6 evenings were professionally done. The details were taken care of, and we made the most of these events. We had approximately 270 individuals in attendance across our 6 evenings in Cody, Bondurant, Cheyenne, Hewlett, and Ucross. And I want to take time to thank our hosts from each of these communities because they were absolutely wonderful. In Wilson, we had Greg and Lauren Hill. They were incredible. Cody, we had Mr. Robert Modell hosted an evening of note for us. In Bondurant, Mark and Elizabeth Hamlin, fantastic stewards of the land there. In Cheyenne, we had Mayor Pat and First Lady Judy Collins hosted there. In Hewlett, we had the Nyman family. They're a storied family in our state that has done so much for the economic part of the northeastern corner of Wyoming. And in Ucross, we had our very own President Pete Doobie and our chairman of our board, Mark Wilson, hosted for us in Ucross. So thank you to those hosts. Just a fun fact, I traveled 3,366.2 miles by truck for these 6 events, and 2,982 miles get you from Boston to LA. So we drove out in the Pacific Ocean a little bit. We had 95 feedback cards turned in from these events. And the purpose of these events, for those of you who came, understand it better than most, but this is about developing lifelong, meaningful relationships that will eventually turn into a major donor portal eventually. And it's going to take a lot more work to get there, but we have a very good start. So we had 95 feedback cards turned in, mostly couples, which was good numbers. 75% of the feedback cards turned in, individuals indicated level of support of 5, which means they fully support the mission of the Wildlife Fund. 9% marked 4 and 4% marked 3. So the individuals we had obviously are wildlife enthusiasts and are excited about what we're doing. More importantly, coming out of these evenings, we had 19 individuals or couples directly indicate on their feedback cards that they want to make a direct investment into the Wildlife Fund. We had 5 individuals or couples that want to make a non-cash gift to the fund. That can be real estate, business investments or interests, investment accounts, and 7 individuals who are interested in leaving a legacy for the fund in their estate plan while avoiding taxation. I want to manage expectations here because from now until the first of the year, my job is going to be with following up with all these individuals and working through what I can do in their personal life to maximize their philanthropic giving, align it with their wishes with the Wildlife Fund. But I think there's some amazing opportunity here for a platform for the future. So we're going to be bird dogging that very hard in the days, weeks, and months to come. And there's just a couple pictures. Upper right is at Bob Modell's ranch in Cody. Bottom right is in Hewlett at the Devil's Tower Golf Club with the Nymans. And then on the left is Greg and Lauren Hill. So very intimate settings, wonderful evenings, and we got a lot out of it. So the board really looked at this strategy early in 2020, and we believe it paid off. It's unique, and sometimes you have to be a little bit different to stand out. Golf for Wildlife. So the Wildlife Fund, it's very important to us, and it's a part of our mission to partner with other organizations, other NGOs. You know, we're here to help accentuate all the wonderful work that's already being done by all these amazing NGOs across the state. And so this event, I think, really highlights that. We partnered with our good friends at the Muley Fanatic Foundation. We had our first annual Golf for Wildlife. This was July 31st at the Buffalo Golf Club. 100% of the proceeds from Golf for Wildlife are going to the I-25 Buffalo to KC project. In our Wildlife Fund board meetings, President Doobie, who's a part of our board, always emphasizes the big gifts are great, the 6-figure checks are great, but we need to have a portal and a strategy for the smaller grassroots donors so people can be a part of these projects that are being built in their backyards. And that's why we wanted to do this in Buffalo, because obviously this wildlife crossing project is in that community. The community stepped up. We had 4 corporate sponsors. We had 20 whole sponsors, most of which were small businesses in Buffalo, which was really cool to see. And we had 68 golfers. For our first annual event, we were psyched about this, very, very excited. And it wouldn't have been possible without the Muley Fanatic Foundation. So the number is being blocked there a little bit, and that's okay, Megan, don't worry about that. But you can see a list of all of our sponsors there. So our corporate sponsors, Maven, Cobalt, Weatherby, and the Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association. Really thank those folks. We netted a total of $7,028.78 for I-25 through this project. And so at this time, I believe my good friend, President and CEO of Muley Fanatic Foundation, Josh Corsi, is on Zoom. Josh, welcome to the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, President Doobie, fellow commissioners, Director Nesvik. Thank you again for your support of this Golf for Wildlife tournament. This was certainly a great start for something that we feel strongly will build with momentum over the years to come. As you can see there, we've already scheduled the 2nd annual Golf for Wildlife tournament that will be hosted by the Rolling Green Country Club in Green River, Wyoming on June 18th, 2022. And we look forward to being able to see if we can continue to find projects and move this around the Cowboy State and really bring stakeholders, as Chris mentioned, from the grassroots level to support these projects that are in their backyard. Thank you very much for your support. And Chris, nice job.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate all you guys do. And a big thanks to President Doobie, his daughter Jess, Mark Wilson, Penny Maldonado, all the folks from Muley Fanatics. It was really a team effort putting this event on, and it was special to do it that way. So the last item on my agenda, obviously, we are all for Director Nesbitt's Inspire a Kid program. We think perhaps this is the most important impact that the Wildlife Fund can have, along with raising money for on-the-ground projects across Wyoming. So thanks to the Wyoming Sportsman's Group, we worked with these wonderful folks out of Gillette, and we were able to bring home $10,000 to help support the Inspire a Kid program for Director Nesbitt, his vision. And the $10,000 is going to creating Pronghorn educational boxes. After working closely with Renee Shell, Ashley Leonard, Rebecca Fitzgerald, and Jason Hunter, all of which I thank them, this grant would not have been possible without them. We designated a need for these educational boxes. Museums and schools will request these boxes throughout the state, but we did not have the ability to loan these out on a long-term basis. That problem has been solved now with the Pronghorn educational boxes. There's going to be a ton of interactive items within those boxes that we'll be able to use on an educational level to spur kids' interest for the great pronghorn in the state of Wyoming. We also are purchasing through this grant educational tracking collars. So these are tracking collars that are built and used for in-classroom purposes that biologists will be able to teach the kids about the importance of migration research. So they'll be able to hide the collars. They'll have a portal in front of them, and they'll be able to track that collar down and show those kids firsthand how these tracking collars work, which is pretty neat. And then also money will be going towards the shipping of expo booth boxes. Obviously, that was done virtually this year. They're coming back into the department. They'll be replenished and sent back out. And there was a lack of funding to pay for the actual postage and shipping. So we were able to fill that void with this $10,000 grant. So again, thank you to the Wyoming Sportsman's Group, and we're going to continue to track down dollars for education here in the state of Wyoming. So today we've talked about evenings of note. It's been a big 3 months for the Wildlife Fund, Golf for Wildlife, and Inspire a Kid. I will also mention wildlife tourism for tomorrow continues to go very well. We just secured a $10,000 check from the Bank of Jackson Hole. They're going to be participating in the program, and we continue to work with hotels and recreational businesses throughout Teton County, and we're expanding that across the state. Taylor Phillips with Jackson Hole Eco Tour Adventures and I are working very, very hard on that. And I also want to mention, we also will be going back in front of the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust for another $500,000 in matching monies for I-25. So that $7,000 we raised from the golf outing, we're going to leverage that and turn that into $14,000, $15,000. Commissioner Jolovich, wonderful job on the work you did for I-25, sir. And we'd be happy to see if we could get that money matched too, to double that through this ask of WWNRT, which that would be a win-win. And that's what we're here for. So we're going to keep working hard. I do have some executive briefings I want to hand to you guys, just recapping some of the things I've said, and also a breakdown of financial data of what the Wildlife Fund has done this year in comparison to last year, so you can see how we are tracking. We want to stay fully transparent and accountable, and appreciate your support. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions or comments for Chris? I just want to say that we are truly blessed to have you on board as the president of the Wildlife Fund. And I think you're doing great things, and I think it won't be long. We'll be turning the corner on some of these bigger donors.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thanks, Chris. Sarah Bridge.
Good afternoon, President Doobie, Commissioners, and Director Nesbitt. By way of introduction, my name is Sarah Bridge with the National Bighorn Sheep Center in DuBois, Wyoming. I've joined the center in November of 2020. Raise of hands who has been to the Bighorn Sheep Center in DuBois. Excellent. So those who haven't, please come visit. I'm here today because I'd like to update you on our center, its mission, our current programs, and where we are going. For a little bit of a history of the center, we opened our doors in 1993, and that was a partnership between Wyoming Game and Fish, as well as the Town Council of DuBois. And the idea is that we would bring folks, tourists, particularly our community, around, taking us to the 2 slides. forward. Around the Whiskey Mountain herd. So just to say thank you to the Game and Fish, we are occupied in a Game and Fish building, and we are truly grateful. Taking us to the next slide. Historically, we've been focused on the Whiskey Mountain herd. What this herd means to us for Du Bois is summarized in a quote I'll share by former game and fish biologist Steve Kilpatrick. With more than 2,500 animals, the Whiskey Mountain Bighorn sheep herd was once the world's largest and most renowned in the lower 48. To sum it up, Bighorn sheep are iconic, and they represent the wildness and the wonder of Wyoming. And as we have tourists flow through Du Bois, we want to change their values. And a way that I like to describe our programs at the Bighorn Sheep Center is that conservation changes from a concept to a value. And it was a gentleman before me who said he's instilling in the hearts, especially in children, the value of conservation that will stay with them forever. And I see that's what we do. And how do we do it? Next slide. I'm sorry, I'm over here saying next slide when I can do it myself, I think. Okay, and how do we do it? Not alone, with our partners. First and foremost, we have Cwd Cheesebro here. She is with the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation. A lot of folks ask the question, okay, Sarah, what's the difference between the Bighorn Sheep Center and Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation? Great question. 2 years ago, we signed a three-way agreement with the National Wild Sheep Foundation and the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation so that we would be their education and outreach arm. We're responsible for education programs and really getting the word out around wild sheep issues. This isn't a list of all of our partners, but listed first is Game and Fish. It's critical that we partner closely with the biologists and researchers and commissioners so that the public can understand, has an outlet through our center of what's going on. I like to show this slide and say that in my short tenure, well, it's almost a year, but in my short tenure with the Sheep Center, what I've learned is that conservation is a collaborative effort. That's the next slide. So, joining the center, in addition to my board, set 3 key priorities. The first is to expand these partnerships. The second, increase organizational capacity. We have a small staff. We work really well together, and we think that we can do even more. And lastly, we want to continue our legacy. So thinking about our priorities, we took a look at our mission and we enhanced it. Today, we think about our programs through this lens. We want to provide education and outreach for the national conservation of wild sheep, wildlife, and wildlands. And with our partnership with Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation and the National Wild Sheep Foundation, we have the ability to funnel what's going on related to sheep research through those organizations. We have four pillars of our educational program. The first is Camp Bighorn. The second is our K-12 school tours. The third are trunks and virtual programs. And the fourth is what I call our Wilderness Connections programs. Camp Bighorn is hosted annually at the Whiskey Mountain Conservation Camp. And we once again thank the Wyoming Game and Fish for allowing us the opportunity to use that really special space. This year, we launched our third year. The K-12 tours, we invite schools throughout Wyoming to come and visit our center. Trunks and virtual programs. So we will send, there's a photo here, trunks with bighorn sheep and wild sheep related information to educators across Wyoming that they can share with their class. During COVID-19, our virtual programs, we really increased, and we have seen great success. For Wilderness Connections, we take both youth and adults outdoors so that they can become familiar with, specifically in Du Bois, the wild spaces that we so value. We'll do a deep dive into Camp Bighorn. So I mentioned that this is our third year. Our first year prior to COVID-19, we had youth from all across the nation, five kids from Alaska, and that's through our Wild Chief Foundation partnership. We host a variety of outdoor programs: archery, kayaking, ethnobotany, taxidermy. We actually had Brian Parker's son join us this summer. It was fantastic. So if you run across him, ask him for his own testimonial. But it's amazing to be able to give youth this experience so that they can have a personal connection with the wildlife and wildlands, and an introduction to the curriculum that they can go on to study in college. This summer, we hosted 21 youth. Again, we did have folks from across the nation, Minnesota, as well as Idaho. So we are really bringing folks from across the nation to this, to Wyoming, to see what we have to offer. I like to share a testimonial from Jason, who applied for a scholarship. He wants to participate in Camp Bighorn because he had so much fun flea fishing. We do offer scholarship programs. So by way of the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation sponsorships, all of the youth who apply for scholarships receive them. Karen Sullivan, who is our education manager, continues to stay engaged with Camp Bighorn participants. So she launches a newsletter quarterly and provides activities. These are 2 logos that children provided from the newsletter. In addition to staying in touch with our youth, we also stay in touch with our educators throughout Wyoming. In partnership with Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, we have launched the Outstanding Teacher Award, where we identify an outstanding Bighorn teacher who is presented with a special something. In this case, it was a special knife, just to say thank you, keep on doing what you're doing, and teaching our kids about what we value most. So now for the statistics. You can see here our outreach numbers. In 2019, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we engaged nearly 13,000 students. We had close to 7,000 visitors walk through our museum doors. If we were to look at these numbers, we'd see an 8% increase in our visitation year over year. In this year, 2021, while we are still operating within COVID-19 pandemic constraints, we've had 4,000 folks walk through our museum, and we've already reached close to 3,300 students. So we continue to get out there, and with just a staff of 4 folks, we're really, I think, making a mark. A few pictures of our museum. We do offer an international Grand Slam donated to us by the Carlsberg family out of Jackson. Full taxidermy mount. Come visit us. Next slide. I'm speaking about our staff. So it's me and 4 others. The museum and gift shop staff is part-time, and actually everyone's part-time, excluding me. And we are the staff and volunteer efforts. I don't believe I mentioned on the Camp Bighorn slide, but it's Karen and a team of volunteers. So this woman single-handedly runs that program with her volunteers by the way of sponsorships. Our board of directors, we see a concentration in Du Bois, folks, and Jess from Powell. We are looking to fill our 4 slots. We would love to have a current Game and Fish representative on that board. We are very fortunate to have Steve Kilpatrick with us, who's former Game and Fish biologist. Diverse source of income. This year already, we have received close to $32,000 in grants. what I'd like to talk to you today is about a classroom expansion project that we launched in 2017. My predecessor, Sarah Domek, and the board looked at our program, saw how much we were growing, and said, hey, we need more space. I agree. We worked with an architect, put together plans for a 2,000 square foot addition to Game and Fish building. So we would finance the building, and then ultimately it would be donated back to Game and Fish. When I started on board, these plans were put forth, and it was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I said, whoa. We started with an estimate of $330,000 to build this classroom. We raised that money in a matter of no time, 1 year. The way that construction is in Du Bois, even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, when we received bids, they came in over $700,000. That's a lot. We're, talking to anybody, I'm not in the construction business, but that's a lot to build a 2,000 square foot expansion. I consulted mentors. We put together a classroom committee to evaluate this project, asking the question, is this feasible? We're all here. We know that we don't shoot at a moving target. Will our fundraising goal for this project keep moving? I don't think so. Well, let me change that. If it is, we're not going to do it. So why I'm here today is we are revisiting this classroom campaign. We have raised $362,000, and in the past month, we received $75,000 in pledges for this expansion. So that puts us today at roughly $250,000 to raise. And I know that we can do it because this is a classroom for our legacy. This is a classroom for adults who will be educated on conservation related topics. This will be a classroom related to children. It'll be a classroom for conservation. And because I believe in that cause, I'm here today making this case to you to support this project and think about us when we come to the commissioner tag. Bold request, I know, and I'm interested in speaking with you all individually about this. So we want to do this strategically so we can build this classroom, but a question I ask as a new executive director is, how will this be sustainable? So I would like to launch this classroom project in addition to increasing our endowment fund, the Butler Conservation Fund, so that would go towards the operating that would be required to run this classroom. So these are two priorities that tie in to our strategic plan to build our legacy, to expand our partnerships, and to increase our operational capacity. So I'll pause there. Thank you. And any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah?
Would you, yes, Mr. President, I do. Sarah, would you revisit those numbers? You've raised $362,000.
362 prior to relaunching, I'll call it, in August. And so with that 362, we received $75,000 in pledges. And so that puts us
In
at,
addition to the 362? In addition to the 362? Okay, so an additional 75. And what's your time frame goal of constructing this room?
if we raise the funds, I have a contractor who would be interested in breaking ground fall of 2022.
Okay. Thank you.
Robert?
Sarah, when you mentioned this classroom, where's the classroom going to be located? I noticed you mentioned that the Game and Fish owns your building that you're in now. Where would the classroom be located?
This would be on the west side of our current building. So if we take us back to slide 1.
And who owns that?
Um,
Who owns the property that the classroom is going to be on?
the physical property is the town of Du Bois.
Okay. So it'd be your classroom on the town of Du Bois's.
And ultimately,
And they've given you permission to do this.
Yes. I stand corrected. So it would be, if you're looking at the picture, the right side of or the right side of the picture, the image.
Don't you have a schematic of it there you showed us?
Yeah. And thank you for bearing with me. It's my first time here. So I am nervous.
You're doing fine.
It's touchy.
So it's that portion out the left side of the Commissioner Roberts.
Okay.
You see, the picture was the.
That's not the current building. That's the building plus the addition.
Got to
Back
flip it
is the
around.
addition.
So, yeah,
Okay.
the portion where it looks like there's seats there, because we set it up in this image as a gallery or an auditorium. I can send out plans if that would be helpful.
Commissioner Byrd?
I think we'd talked well on the phone and I never could find all my notes. Does anybody know, did we already give 200,000? Was that the number? I believe that we donated. Would that be included in this 362,000?
According to my records, we received $100,000 from,
It was 100.
And that's part of the 362.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we thank you for that.
Mr. President, ma'am,
Jolovich?
give me those numbers, your square feet and what was the estimated cost?
Sure. It's about 2,000 square feet. And the estimate that we initially received from contractors before our negotiations was 717.
Why am I having a huge problem with 2,000 square feet and that much money?
I am too. So apparently so is the technology. And
I realize it's Du Bois, but my gosh.
I am with you. And I think my priority as an executive director is to be, the Wyoming way is to be realistic, to be smart, have common sense, right? I think that we can go out to more contractors throughout Wyoming and see if we can get somebody who would do this job for potentially less.
That's just an ungodly amount for 2,000 square
And
feet.
I come out with this bold ask. I know this is a lot of money to raise. And it took me, I've been with the center since November, and I don't mean to be going over time, but it took me to, digest this and say, is this the right decision given the amount of money we're looking at? Funds would go to both the actual building costs as well as our endowment. So my goal here is we try to get building for the least cost possible. And I think that if we get the right folks involved and we let people know about this, we can do it smartly and responsibly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
That's 350 square.
Do we have any other call to the public, Megan, or anybody who would like to address the commission? Anybody in here? Oh, I saw a hand up. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Jolovich, second by Commissioner Byrd to adjourn. Discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you very much. We sure appreciate it. Thank you.